Video 5, my take on Buddhism. It is interesting because I keep cycling back to, you see, we have these, most of you have, I have at least, these moments in our lives where we're put in a situation where we have this life-altering experience, a signature event of some kind. And that exam where my teacher asked me, is Buddhism and Christianity the same? And I said, yes, it is. And he said, no, it isn't. And he completely shut me down. So this is me, having a conversation with my history teacher because he was a little bit disappointed in me because we had a lot of good discussions and he knew I was a bright girl. And yet in the situation of the exam, I kind of flunked because I said yes. And before I could explain it, he shut me down. And then you kind of know how it goes. You're already stressed and you're nervous and you're already in your limbic system and you're running on the pumps of adrenal gland, infuse and fight and flight, and you want to run out the fucking door. Some of us are better at exams than others. And then he just shut me down and I just went black completely. And I just crawled through the exam more or less. I did pass it though, but it was not to the best of my abilities. So this is me doing that exam, explaining why there are similarities, because I could see that already back then in an age of 18. I already knew it back then. So this is me just not taking revenge, but righting a wrong by having you as my witness to this, ending that cycle and saying, and comparing these two things and saying, this is, of course not exact same, but it's similar. It has similar features. There are similar, trials. Jesus is in the wilderness where he is being tempted by Satan or the devil. And when the Buddha begins his journey, he is tempted by Maya, or the god of, with his daughters, sexual energies. And Joshua refers to, or the Jesus in the character Jesus refer that the Satan, as we're seeing it in the, sorry about that, my brain is crashing here because there's a lot of information when I try to do the comparison here. But because some of the names I've forgotten, and it's just kind of these entities that remains, and I have a different perspective of these entities that are not in alignment with what is said in the gospel and in the narratives of the Buddha. So just kind of, because when we talk about that, they are both underworld deities. So let us say that both the Jesus character and the character in the Buddhist mythology are tempted by underworld forces. And these underworld forces always goes with power, it goes with sexual desire, it always goes with gaining wealth, in all of these materialistic forms. It's all about materialism. It's about succumbing to the desires of the body and the lowest personal needs that you can have of the limbic instinctual layer. And that goes with the underworld forces that are connected to the instinctual layer to a large degree, which I explain in the whole transition classes why. But that is some of the subconscious that comes up and tempts people that are beginning the path of liberation, because it's connected to the physicality. So it's part of the path of liberation to be tempted by the materialistic powers that want to keep you in their grip so you will not get into the higher levels of your awakening process. And that temptation still goes on today. Trust me, I've seen it in all of you that are doing this. You are still struggling with the same issues. So that's part of the path of liberation, that you are fighting off the underworld forces, which is also represented in the Kabbalah, where to get access to the different sephirot, where you will gain your higher order capacities, you have to wrestle with both the angel and the devil. That's where it comes from. You have to wrestle with both the angel and the forces of under Lucifer. And this is a different group of entities, because this is connected to the Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, where you have the angels and the hierarchy of angels, where you have the ones that are doing the bidding of God, and then you have the ones that are working under the forces of Lucifer. And Lucifer and Satan are not the same. So the one that tempts Jesus in the desert is the desert snake, and we have that snake as part of Egyptian mythology as well, because the Ra is fighting with him all the time. That is Apu, that is the great snake that are trying to devour our world. And we see that snake represented in the book of Job, where Job is handed over to Satan, that is the big snake, and we have the the big snake in the Garden of Eden, and he's the one that tempts Eve, or Chava as she's called, the mother of all humanity, the vessels of all humanity that came later on, born under the sin of the snake, is represented there, as well as the carnal lusts, which is why many has interpreted the whole biting of the apple of the tree of life is where sexuality came into place, and that's why they got expelled from the Garden of Eden, which is probably not completely wrong, because there is an old understanding for those who are really going deep into the path that human desires, in no matter form they are represented in the physical organism, cannot be merged with the divine laws of the higher order energy systems. And I completely agree with that. So there have been many later teaching systems, including Kundalini Yoga, including Tantrism, and all these kind of things that have tried to bridge this, being highly influenced by the materialistic forces, trying to say, yeah, you can do both. You can both have your human form and enjoy that one in all of its pleasures and still be enlightened. And the matter of the fact is, with the Buddha shows us as well, you can't do that. And that's also why when it came up later on, is kind of, oh yeah, Jesus had, Miriam was his consort, was his, they were married and they created this, Sangreal holy lineage of whatever we saw in the book of, now I forgot the Dan Brown book. For me, it's just kind of, no, I don't go with that one. But there is another story actually, and this is where the Kalontics come in with the different versions of Jesus. And I actually do have a version of a Jesus figure that does have a family, and he leaves that family similarly as the Buddha left his family behind after he had put an offspring into the world. So that is interesting. But the Buddha, as far as we know, he lived as a hermit the rest of his life without any sexual activity. And the gurus are doing the same thing. They are sparing their life force and not wasting it on the ground, as it's said. And the ones we are seeing that replicate again in Western culture within monks and nuns that are not allowed to have sex either, because they are devoted to the work under Christ. And that does not mean human fornication. But since most of the ones that are trying to do this are not really getting the mysticism and the activation of the higher order energy system, they are then left floating in the wind with their human biology and the imperative the biology has on humans to create offspring. And then each month has the cycle of sexual energies that are produced because of electrochemical processes. So if you don't have the higher order energy system that goes in and overrides that and clears it out and purifies it so that these desires are extinguished, they are closed out. They cease to exist like a fire from where water is poured onto it. So it ceases to be. It cannot be ignited. That's what the higher order energy system does when you integrate it. All the human desires, the low levels of the physicality, will be transformed and transmuted into the higher order equivalent, where these electrochemical processes no longer controls the physical form. So that is the solution for all of you out there that are struggling with your sexual desires, that the more you purify your energy system and purify the biofield, the emotional field, the mental field, and get these under control and get rid of the programs that are biologically integrated into your human DNA, you will then transform these into the higher equivalent, where sexual energy becomes part of the transmutation forces, from where you can develop quite extensive powers within the evaporation or amplification dynamics of the advanced energy system. And the emotional desires that most people transfer into love and relationships and offspring and what have you will be transformed to this great connection with your own energy system and the devotion on the path of awakening, that your true lover will be your process of awakening. The true love that you will gain, that is the light of the soul, as it's called in the Bala material, is where you reconnect to your own true self and begin that true partnership. That's the orientation inwards with your inner human, the integration and merging with your inner human. That's the true relationship you should be in. That's the only progressive relationship you should be in, because the moment you try to do that feature with an outer human, you are then blending two independent energy systems in a way that is technically unnatural. We are not supposed to blend that way. We can, for a short period of time, merge as a kind of what is called horizontal merge, where we transfer information to each other, done telepathically, as well as via code systems, where we can, if we work together, that's the quick way to do it. The Pleiadians developed a different type of technology where we could technically link up to the same cube, and that's part of our system, and that's why one cube can access a lot of energy fields, and by that give the same level of information if we are connected to it via a TG. And that was how they made it as in kind of a production line in the fourth cycle after the fall of Atlantis, which made it so much easier to hijack our system, which is ridiculous. Anyway, so just saying that there has been some really bad decision making in our system. But it's not natural for in highly developed individual energy systems to do a long-term, what we call merge, as we are seeing it in sexual activity that merges the energy fields, and by that transfer the content of each individual to each other in the sexual activity, which for people that are activating their higher level energy system and in the period of cleanse of that, see it in their best interest to find ways not to engage in sexual activity, especially if they do it with a person that's absolutely not doing any forms of energy work. They will literally become so magnetic and pull in so much from the person, and to some degree activate that person in ways that person is seriously not interested in. And this is where we see people that are on the path of liberation and have gone into the awakening process and have begun that higher order developmental process. If they fall in love or has been put in a scenario where they are being pushed into a romantic relationship, often done by gray intervention, that merging then literally puts them into the lowest point of the common denominator between the two in the merging. Sexual energies will always pull people away from the higher order energy system. And that is what I see as it's better depicted in the temptation of the Buddha than it is in the temptation of Christ, because when we talk about the Satan and when it's just going with power and materialism, and that is when you look into the gospel, it's all about power, it's all about materialistic possessions and coming into the heavenly realms. Is all about letting go of your possessions. It's not about, even though it's said in the Gospels, it's what you are on the inside. It's who you are, the inner level of you that counts. And that is why you should let go of the outer materialistic things. It's not that we are to become poor and miserable. It should definitely be a part that we have what we need. But this is what the Buddhist monks are exemplifying for us as well. When they do live in these monasteries, they are coming out to society from time to other to gain rise or get donations or whatever. And then they retreat to the inner world. So they are doing this, normally living within their inner world in that little community they have made, but they still go out in the outer world, exemplifying as an example that we are representation of the inner realms of your higher awareness, whereas the outer, on the other side of the wall, are the commoners that are just doing what we could call the Hinduism or the broad path of Buddhism that involves different deities, which is the complete opposite of what the Buddha actually taught and what he was sent to do. So that is again a later distortion of the original teachings. So all systems have this temptation as you go from the path of liberation into the path of awakening. And that goes with, are you a body or are you an inner human? Are you an outer human or an inner human? That's the first schism that we have to confront in ourselves. And that's the first battle. And that's what the Hindu calls the Kuruksha, where you battle yourself and your own desires. And that is represented in the Buddha and his temptation of Maya and the underworld force, the underworld deity that surfaces as he sits under the Bodhi tree, I think it is, and shows him all of these gorgeous daughters and what have you, and tempt the Buddha on the sexual energies, which I think is, that's why in a way prefer the story of the Buddha, because you have the family setting, you have the nobility, you have what he leaves behind. He leaves behind position, his wife, his child, everything that people find to be, these are the highest levels inside this world. This is all what we all strive for: money, power, position, family, love, offspring, right? So that's what people strive for. And it's said that the Buddha saw it as a chain around his foot. He saw it as a kind of obligation he could not live up to. And he found it more in his path to go out and find the deep answers to some of the things that he saw outside the walls of his temple. So it's again this, as we see it in the book of Exodus, it's again this, we have the city and the city gates and the walls, and then around we have the wilderness, where you leave the city and the city gates and what the protection you get there under the deities, and you go out to the wilderness, and there you are encountering all of these forces of nature, be it underworld forces or divinic forces or angelic forces, as we see it in the Old Hebrew Testament and the 5 books that are made there of the different forefathers and the founding fathers of the Jewish religions, what they are encountering of different forces out there and experiences that are testing them on their continued will to do the inner work, to get to the knowledge where they are getting awakened to a degree of understanding the laws of God and the laws of reality and what it truly means to be an inner human. So that also goes, we are seeing it with Jacob, all of the forefathers, the Jewish forefathers, Jacob and Isaac and Abraham and what have you, and Moses, and all of the tribulations they go through. And the same is depicted in the story of the Buddha, which again goes with this. There are similarities and then there are dissimilarities, just to put it in context, or just say, oh, it's actually the same, because it isn't. But there are so many things that are similar when you begin to work with it symbolically and understand the symbols that are being utilized in 2 different cultures. The symbols are in many ways saying the same thing. So this is also where we go in and say, is this story a true story, or is it a made up story that shows us what we need to do to get back to our original consciousness structure, which is what enlightenment is. So we are going from the 3rd cycle, physical, spatial, being in organic form, understanding, navigating instinctually in a space and time, where we learn to administer ourselves as a physical being, whatever that means. Which is part of the underworld forces now today, but we're still tied into it because that's the previous cycle that humanity was part of and where we failed big time. And that's part of what the timeline event drew back into the 4th cycle. And then we have the 4th cycle that goes with the vibrational field, the heart field, and the awakening process, learning to expand our perception field in the manner as energy into a concentric circles around our physical form, from where we can access timelines and the original reality structure that goes with the specific vibrational state of your consciousness units and the higher order energy system that allows you to connect to the holographic teaching system, the wisdom level, or the Shekinah, or the Holy Ghost, or the TG that you has got inserted, or whatever that is, and you can remove it if it's not for you to continue working with that, because it's now completely outdated. So from that level on, and the clearing processes of timelines and what's connected to there, you get the ability to vibrate up energetically and build that higher order 6-layered energy system you need to build the 3 higher layers from where your brain can activate out of the mind field and the mental energies and into the original density, radiation, holographic features, from where you learn to work with complex information system that will then be divided up in 6 layers that are following the different energy transformation processes of your 6-layered higher order energy system. And this is what I teach in the whole transition science classes. So that's the enlightenment process. And that is depicted very nicely, more accurately in the Buddhist teachings than it is in the Joshua gospel accounts, because there it has been really redacted into fitting a specific world purpose that is very tightly oriented towards the Baals and what they came in with of teachings and ideas of kingship with the Mardukians that shifted the original Anunnaki culture of the old Mesopotamian levels that were more similar in their construction to the Egyptian culture, because they were seated at the same time but under different races, whereas the Baals that came later on were more warlike, they were more kingship, overlord, warlords, what have you. And this is where we have the basic of the Western culture as we know of it today, where the Eastern culture, and I'm not here talking about China because that's something completely on its own, but India and all of that, where we have spirituality, and that culture goes with the avian mammal brotherhood remains of the original Brahmin priestly culture. So we are having this, again, division in our world between kings and priests that at some point were working together and later on actually divided as part of how our world was divided between the different factions that came on in later on around 5,000 years before our current timeline, more or less, give or take. That's where we see the huge shift in cultures on our planet. Okay. So in many ways, I think I have, when I say, so this is how, I cannot go into specific details of what the Buddha taught, as in kind of, oh yeah, now I'm mimicking his teachings and I can repeat his teachings and say his teachings, because I was not there. I have not seen it. I have not overseen it. I have not heard it with my own 2 ears. So, but I have memories of it. I have access to it. I have had previous incarnations where I actually were a devout Buddhist monk with a very unfortunate demise by been taken out by torture by the Chinese. And these layers are in me that, again, also ignited by the circumstances I was put in that put me in that direction. And that goes with, again, with the circumstances the Buddha was put in, and his path from if we look in the type of symbology, that first he had the whole Maya underworld physical path of liberation, and then he went into where he also, I can't remember the chronology of the story, but he definitely also from time to time had a period where he worked with gurus. He worked in different extensive ways of controlling the physical form, controlling the emotional features, what have you, and that would me seeing going from the physical form into the emotional form, where he learned that the balance point was the right approach when we talk about emotions. You have to be in between the extremes and find the balance point, because if you have a music instrument and you tie the string too hard, it will break, and if you tie it too loose, you won't get the tune that you want. So to create harmony, you have to be in the balance point in between, and that is when I talk about in the whole the psyche energy and the psyche processes and the six-layered way of working with energy. I'm working with the same ideas, where I talk about that the using the opposition in the vibrational field, that's part of the heart field, where you learn to use these oppositions to transform energy and create harmony. That's the same idea, that's the same concept that will lead to that synergetic effect that activates your mind field. So you need that harmony, that correct harmony tune. This is what has been done when you have in Kala Chakra as well as in the Kundalini Yoga. Not that we are to do that one, but you use sounds to vibrate as a specific type of balance. You have the Tibetan monks that use the word Om to create that balance point where you have that harmony, where the frequency waves are going into specific modulation pattern that is in alignment with the concentric circles of vibration that goes from your heart field and out and creates that six-layered energy system. And that transforms the emotional field as well. But you have to make the sound. You can't listen to it by some synthesized frequency, vibration, or whatever you find on the internet that tells you, oh yeah, this is the vibration you need to get into harmony. You have to create the voice the sound with yourself, which is part of the ancient teachings of the chakra system. You have different tones that goes with each chakra to balance it, to find the midpoint from where it will lift itself from its lower position with its crown, its leaves turned towards the physical, into turning around and become upright and turn towards the emotional field and the heart field and activate the higher level, which the Dalai Lama talks about as compassion. That is the idea of that compassion that is not feeling compassionate and oh, it's so sad and it's so bad for you, but the true understanding of what you are encountering, being able to fully encompass and contain other people as they truly are, see them as they truly are, and then vibrate in what is in their best interest, so they can be vibrated up to a higher level of energy where you use your energy system as the opposition to create first disharmony, and then you vibrate back and forth into a harmonious point where they will be lifted higher and you will with that point also to a certain degree be lifted higher as well. But this is not done so you get lifted higher. This is actually a gift you give out of true compassion, where you feel with the other person so that you can vibrate them up to their highest potentials. So it's a gift that is given without expectations of anything in return. And if you ask me, that should be the true love. That no matter what we do this to lift people into their highest potentials. And sometimes that goes with a little bit of a push that can feel very uncomfortable. So compassion is not just about, oh, I feel with you and I'm so kind with you and love and light and what have you. It goes in many, many different ways, where, as you see it with the Buddhist monks and their teaching systems, whenever you encounter one of the ones that have reached this level of awakening and have the understanding of how to utilize knowledge correctly, they will rarely give you the answers. They will always initiate a process. Because as I can't remember which one, I often refer to it, but the story goes, or you could say as a kind of, there's many different versions of this story. There's the one with how to get water, but there's another one that goes with the fisherman. Let's just use that way. You can help a person and by going out and make a lot of fish, and then you can feed that human, but that will only last for so long. So it will be more prudent to teach the person how to fish, how to engineer his tools so he can sustain himself. And that is what goes with the awakening process. It's not just about gaining knowledge. It's also about gaining knowledge that can be integrated and lead to a more awareness lifestyle that leads to an ability to sustain yourself energetically and consciously and learn the dynamics of what it means to elevate yourself into a higher awareness, from where you vibrate that type of energy that constantly will transform the processes you are in to a higher level of understanding that leads to the awakening process, where you begin to see things as they truly are in their complete pattern. From that level on, and when you have that vibration, you access all levels of reality from the correct vibrational level using principle 2, the law of balance. Then you are lifting yourself into the law of participation and the law of reciprocity and the law of true inner knowledge, where you really begin to upgrade and activate your mind field into its higher potentials, where you will be able to access complex information system and patterns that are at that level, even though it is radiation energies and it is light. That light is, if you break it down, are code systems. And these code systems will then give you access to, first and foremost, a lot of technologies, a lot of old levels of our reality field, as well as really beginning to work with what we call transmutation, where you're able to either amplify and upgrade, or you can deconstruct and evaporate, so that you can choose and discern in between what is actively supposed to be part of my process of activating the highest levels of my energy system. And that is the true enlightenment process. Because if you do the 6 layers correctly, and if you get through these different layers of your liberation, activation, or awakening, and into the enlightenment process, where you gain true knowledge and learn how to use radiation energies in the correct manner, following the laws of energy and the reality field itself. That's the laws of God, if you like, but the laws of the world that we are part of, that governs energy in the correct manner. So you really work with energy in a way that is for the reality field, continuation of the reality field within its correct purpose and function, from where you can develop higher levels of consciousness as well. Then you can expand into where these rings no longer are rings, but becomes this grand light field, where if you break it down, are very complex code systems, but they radiate, and as they work together in these complex 6-layer patterns and blend in and becomes this beautiful sphere of light, then you will only see it as light, because it's not really possible to, you can, if you have the sight, and you can see as that sphere of light orb, very large sphere orb kind of thing, is around a vessel or a person. You normally see depicted around the head in the older Middle-Age teachings, but the whole, that sphere, and that's also what's depicted around the Buddha, that crown that he gets of all of these layers, as well as when we talk about the Ajna chakra, that goes into the crown chakra, and the Ajna chakra is that discernment, that is the vibration between the opposition to create synergy, to create the higher level of energy that leads to enlightenment, that leads to that beautiful golden sphere that can that are code systems that ignite and transform that 6-layered energy system into being able to hold consciousness. Then you have a true enlightened person, and if that truly happens, then the transfigurations come in play, and that is also what is depicted in when we talk about the transfiguration of Jesus on the cross, where he defied the cross is a symbol of the materialistic outer forces. We are crucified in the outer reality on the cross of life, and he overcome that, and he defied death, as in kind of that is the entropy forces of the physical form. It only leads to death, and defied that and renewed himself and came back in his higher order energy system with this radiation coming from him, which is what he left this system with. And that's technically where you're capable of walking between the planetary systems in your energy, your light body, with your consciousness structure intact. But if here, as things are now in the completion cycle, we will eventually also evaporate the 6-layered energy system, and there only leave as consciousness units that are in pure radiation energies. These are the orbs I talk about that will use the hypergate system. That is technically part of your 6-layered energy system. I talk about that in the whole transition science classes as well. A very advanced level. So unless you are ready for a very deep explanation on this one, this will give you a little bit of hints of combining these different old belief systems and what is behind them, and we can easily take this and put it into the chakra system teachings and derive the same level of information there, even though that the chakra system as we know of it is specifically engineered for the Aryan Shiva races that were part of the priestly lineages going back to the Brahims and not the Westerners. So again, these are some of the understandings that we have to have when we work with the different belief systems. So, so that is kind of what I see and how I would interpret this. Of course, I could pull out another disc and go into more details about what actually happened when he was out there doing his, what did he actually work with when he worked with the gurus, what did he actually learn, and all of these kind of things, which are probably not so necessary, because for me, this is just the container of again, in my interpretation, and you can say, well, Randy, it's kind of a projection because this is how you work with it, and therefore you project it into these teachings, and then it becomes part of these teachings. And you could be absolutely correct, because I am interpreted within the frame of references I have. And so will a Buddhist monk. And so will a guru person, and so will a Dalai Lama person, or so will anyone that are doing his or her intensive studies of these texts, whether it's the Pali text or it's in his original language or whatever it is. They will always come up with their versions of what they are interpreting, because we are interpreting through our mental faculties. So is what it is. It's a catch-22. We can't go beyond our brains. We are our brains. So therefore, part of the enlightenment is to develop our brain structure, which is also what I work with, because not until we get that one up and running on its true levels will we truly be able to really work with knowledge and understand what knowledge actually is and what it is capable of doing and what it means to be able to access information holographically. Okay, so I just tapped into there a little bit of something I actually wanted to say to round this up regarding Buddhism and the Buddha, but it slipped my mind considering I've just done these 5 videos in a row, so my brain is getting a little bit tired here. So I think that for now will suffice in this little sequence. If I, by any chance, should come up with anything later on that is important for the interpretation of this, of course, I will add it in. But for now, I said my piece and why I think there are similarities between all religions and what I think is the original purpose of all philosophies and religions, whether it's Greek philosophy reaching nous, that is the 5th cycle, or it is enlightenment, that is within the Buddhist teachings, or it is with the Joshua mission, or that was to go into the 4th cycle, but technically Miriam, she came in with some of the later information that would lead to the 5th cycle as well. So that was a joint teamwork they were doing there. He also had levels for a specific male branch within the human reality that would lift them into the 5th cycle, which is one of the reasons why he was taken out. So this is how I see it when we talk about the path of liberation, physical, the path of awakening, that's the emotional 4th cycle, getting out of that one, activating the vibrational field to access timelines and be able to transform and clear energies by the use of opposition, creating synergy from where you go into the brain field that develops that into the perception field from where you're able to access the true levels of knowledge, the true levels of science and the higher order levels of our reality from where our complete energy system will be transformed into actively and potentially linking correctly up to our reality field from where we should have, not now, because now it's all about getting out of the effects of the timeline event, but originally, once we reach that level, we would become as gods and be part of the continuation and re-engineering and development of the reality field we were part of. We would literally become planetary logos, a planetary logos or planetary logoi in plural. So that is part of the process as well, and that is why the planetary hierarchy created these different initiations. Anyway, so it's all about that. It's the same thing in my perspective that we are all trying to do, no matter what teaching system we choose to embark on. The path, the goal, what we're trying to achieve with this all comes down to differences in our lineages that points us in different directions within different teaching systems. So that means that if all depending on your original genetics and your original configuration and where you were before the timeline event, are the dominating and determining factor of which path you will be drawn to when we are in the completion cycle. Because here we will be drawn to everything that we originally were as part of the resetting. Our planet, the reality field is resetting, and so are we. So we will be pushed back into everything that we were after the timeline event and before the timeline event, if we can cross the gap and get beyond the limitations that were put onto us because of the timeline event. And I explain all of that in my material as well. So with that one said, for now, I will finish this little sequence and thank you for listening in. And definitely, I hope I've given you something to contemplate upon and giving you some insights in how I perceive, no matter whatever you push towards me, I will end up with the same analysis and the same conclusion. And for me and for us, I think the challenge is to learn to become more inclusive and understand these different lineages with their different abilities, which were part of the original Pillar project, but also part of the 12 universal lineages, and why we were divided into these to begin with, to complete and evolve and develop within the different universal cycles. And that is part of the next 9-year activation and cleanup process that we, as those of us who still have ancient types of genetics, will begin to unfold and understand and activate within ourselves, to be able to clear out and then evaporate and move on, and only take with us what should be part of our original either higher order energy system or what remains of our template field and our original consciousness structure. So that is shortened down, in essence, what my work is also about. Thank you.